Recording. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. How are you? This morning, we're going to talk about the Cannabis Act and how it relates to our field. It is important to know because we have a lot of people asking about these rules, especially if you're a landlord. So it's important to be able to educate our clients on the rules and regulations. So stop me at any time if you guys have any questions, if you have anything, any input. I'm kind of going to go back and forth between two documents because I did attend when the Cannabis Act was first coming out, a Mark Wise Leader conference. And then after that, the rules have been updated a little bit, but I'm still going to go over some of his content because it is pertinent and it's good. I'll just sort of stop and go back and forth when there, you'll see that some of the content or rules have changed. So share screen here. So Cannabis Act, what realtors should know, right? Let me just make sure that my mic is on because I know last week it wasn't there for a few minutes. Yep, there it is. All right. So think about what you can and cannot do with respect to alcohol and cigarettes, smoking, and just add cannabis to that list. So people are, really confused thinking that there are all these crazy rules, but basically it's just been added to the Smoking Act and the liquor license laws of Ontario. So basically what that means is cannabis consumption is an extension of the rules regarding consumption of alcohol under the Liquor License Act of Ontario. Oh yeah, sure, thank you. Cannabis consumption is expansion of what is already regulated under the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. What happened is they not only regulated the production of smoke and smoking of cannabis cigarettes, the production and usage of edible cannabis was not allowed, but that's something that's changed. I think it changed in October of 2019. No, came in October 2019. So the edibles came in a little later on. This, when I attended this course, it wasn't, it was only the smoking they were addressing that was legal, but now the edibles are legal as well, right? So the objectives, for the federal bill are to prevent young people under the age of 18 from accessing cannabis. Restriction on marketing, packaging, sponsorships, similar to the restrictions now on selling tobacco products. So what they're doing is they want to do different retailers who are selling them under restricted guidelines so that they can take it sort of off the streets and out of the younger kids' hands and put it under, only for the population of 19 and up, right? Provinces had the opportunity to raise it. Ontario kept it at 19 for the legal age. They want to protect public safety by establishing strict product safety and product quality requirements. So this was another issue that people were putting other things in the products, whereas if they regulated at the government level, they were hoping that with the dispensaries that they would be better quality products for people using recreational cannabis anyways. They also wanted to deter the criminal activity happening in the province by imposing serious criminal penalties on those operating outside of the legal framework. So to be the same if you're selling like liquor, or if you're selling, cigarettes outside of the store. They wanted to reduce the burden on the criminal justice system. So because it was legal, there were so many things coming down just from people who were not even doing major crimes, but all these minor crimes, like people who were just smoking it or keeping small portions on for personal use. So by making it legal, they kind of reduced the burden on the criminal justice system as well. Right? So what came into play was called the Cannabis Smoke-Free Ontario and Road Safety Statute Law Amendment Act. It applies to anyone under the age of 19, just like cigarettes and alcohol. You cannot sell cannabis to anybody under the age of 19. It permits cannabis only to be distributed through licensed Ontario retail stores. And this is the part that comes into play a little bit for us as realtors now. It permits up to 4 cannabis plants per residence, includes backyards, garden, and within their home what they're growing, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. I just want to go over the rules so we have kind of an idea of what the rules are that are in place right now, and then we'll go over how it pertains to us as agents. So replaces the Smoke-Free Act and Electronic Cigarette Act with the new Smoke-Free Act. And the amendments to the Highway Traffic Act regarding impaired driving. So driving with alcohol or drugs in your body are the same thing now. You're not allowed to consume alcohol in the car. You're technically not allowed to consume cannabis while driving a vehicle. It will permit condominium and apartment occupants to smoke cannabis in their unit and on their balcony. So this was another big impact on our industry as real estate agents. And we'll kind of see how that impacted us a little bit when we go over what condominiums did to sort of combat this or to try and control it, right? So what's a criminal offense? Okay, what'll lead to an indictable offense in Ontario? If you have possession over 30 grams, if you're any distribution or selling, importing or exporting, production of over 4 cannabis plants per residence, illegal cannabis, or use by people under the age of 18, right? So the only people who are allowed to disperse it now are the dispensaries. Now people are getting licenses for this, just like you would have to get a liquor license to sell any kind of alcohol. One issue now is whether this will affect people traveling to the US if they have used work for or invest in cannabis companies, right? So consumption at provincial level, no person shall consume cannabis in a public place. Okay, so we got to just think of it like we keep on referring back to the fact that it's just like the smoke-free laws. So if you go into a restaurant, you're not allowed to spark a cigarette or an electronic vape or something like that. You're not allowed to do with cannabis as well, right? Workplace within the meeting because of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, in a vehicle or a boat, or any prescribed place, right? So prohibited places are enclosed public spaces, enclosed workplace, schools, obviously, building or grounds surrounded by the building of a private school. So, you know, a lot of these like schools, even if you're outdoors, they say not within 30 feet of the building or something like that. For smoking, the same goes for cannabis. Any indoor area of a condominium, apartment building, or university. So, you know, in these common areas of these, you know, condos, universities, school grounds, parking garages, party rooms, childcare centers for sure. A place where home childcare is provided, whether or not children are present. So, you know, if you're running a home daycare, you're not allowed to smoke cannabis within your property, even when the kids aren't there during the evening, for instance, when they all go home. A place where an early years program is provided, so same thing. Reserved seating of a sports arena or entertainment venue, or a prescribed place or area that belongs to a prescribed class. Yes, what's up?
So this is for prohibited places that you can smoke.
You can't, yeah.
So, I mean, like prohibited places, like places you can't smoke. So it says like a place where a home childcare is provided, whether or not the children are present. Like, can you have this stuff there, just not smoke it? Like, what if you run a business? Or
that's a good question. I mean, I assume it would be the same as any other product that, you know, people under the age of 19 aren't supposed to have access to, as long as it's not easily accessed, for sure. I'm sure people who do daycare out of their home might have a bottle of wine somewhere sitting in their fridge. As long as it's not easily accessed by the people, I think it would still be fine as far as I'm concerned.
And then the smoking, like, what if, like, so I'm thinking of it in terms of cigarettes, because it's like, yeah, I wouldn't, if I had a daycare, I wouldn't be smoking cigarettes while the kids are there.
While the kids are there, but you're not even allowed to smoke when they're not present.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
But in the house, so like, what if you were to go to your backyard or something, like, is that like still like?
It all depends on what space, I guess, you know, so some daycare people, if you're doing home daycare, perhaps maybe they have a little area in their yard for the kids to play. I would assume that would encompass that area as well, but I don't really know hard and fast that like what it would be for daycare rules and regulations. But basically what they're saying is the same things for smoking. You're not allowed to smoke in the school, even when the kids aren't there, right? You're not allowed to smoke in the daycare, even when they're not there or present. You're not allowed to smoke in common areas of condominium buildings, inside restaurants, within certain footage of many buildings like hospitals, again, schools, churches. A lot of these have those signs that you can't smoke within a certain range of them. This all applies same to the cannabis laws that came in 2019. So it's all, it comes down to the same act, right? All right, so today, if you observe someone consuming alcohol or liquor in the hallway of an apartment building or smoking a cigarette in a restaurant, a provincial offense notice can be issued by an enforcement officer. It will be the same if you see someone smoking cannabis in the same places, right? Medical cannabis is the one exception. So again, this will go over a little bit how this pertains to us, especially in the real estate market. Users may grow up to a 30-day supply for themselves and have 150 grams in their possession. So that's a lot more than just a recreational user. However, an employer could also set aside, however, an employer could also set aside an area for medical cannabis to be consumed so as not to affect any of the other employees. So if you can produce your card saying that this is for medicinal use, your employer could put a section aside for you. So here's where it starts sort of coming into play for us. A lot of condominium boards put conditions on smoking medical marijuana inside a unit by requiring proof that, for example, edible marijuana products can not resolve the person's illness, and if smoking must take place, making the unit owner pay to provide proper ventilation so it does not bother any unit. So the big thing that came into play, especially for recreational use, is that, say for instance, you as an agent have put a tenant into a property and you're aware that they're using it for medical reasons or recreational reasons now that it's legal. Your landlord is the one responsible to put things into play that it doesn't ruin the reasonable enjoyment of the units around. So when we went for this conference, what they were saying is that basically, as a landlord, if the units around you are complaining that there's smell coming from the unit, because it is a very distinctive smell. I mean, but even for cigarette smoke, let's just say it's both cigarettes and cannabis. The landlord is responsible. You can put in clauses into the standard form of lease that cover non-smoking laws, but if it's ruining the enjoyment of the units around it, the landlord is responsible to put things into play that will reduce that nuisance to the tenants around. For instance, better ventilation. They had actually different products they were showing us as examples where, you know, you kind of you smoke the cigarette or the cannabis and you blow the smoke out through a certain tube. You could ask your tenant to please use this because it kind of filters the smell out as well by doing that. So you might need to purchase these accessories for your tenant in the property if the neighbors around are complaining. So the onus does end up falling back on the unit owner, right? Police will now be able to close a residence and remove people if they find more than the permitted number of 4 plants being grown. So this was a big thing coming out. They were like 4 plants per person. People were asking that a lot. It's not, it's 4 plants per residence, right? So if you have put tenants in your property now, you have to be very careful because what do we do when people are growing marijuana inside a property? We consider it a grow op, right? So you have to make sure that they're doing it in a controlled way, that it's not damaging the property and it's not creating stigma on the property that you're governing for your landlord, for your investor client, right? You're putting these tenants into the property if you discover that they are growing marijuana within the property or outside, you know, but mostly inside is the key problem. Again, the onus falls on the landlord. They were talking about just making sure that they're not damaging the property, growing it inside. You know, they have that, like these units you can use that are like little, you know, you ever seen those temporary closets where they zip up? They have these kind of encasements now that you can grow the cannabis in. You might need to provide your tenants with such things just so they do not damage the property, because you cannot ban them from growing it because they are allowed 4 per residence, right? So condominiums have 3 options to prepare. They, you know, for the new law, and they did a lot of this. A lot of the condominiums amended their declaration to prohibit it. The only problem is that 80% of owners have to vote in the condo corporation in order for it to pass, right? So imagine you're in a building and you have a lot of people that use recreational or medicinal cannabis. It's really hard to get 80% of that vote. But if you do, and the majority of the building agrees, you can amend the declaration for the condo. And a lot of the condos did. They could change the rules to prohibit it. So you only need the majority at a meeting to improve. They'll likely be used to the most. So again, it's the same sort of thing. You can kind of amend the rules to accommodate it. Maybe it's only allowed in certain areas, or maybe it's only allowed in the outdoor spaces like balconies and rooftop terraces, right? Or you can do nothing. You can use the existing condominium laws of the unit owners not causing nuisance or danger to other unit owners to prohibit this. So you can just sort of go about and keep it same as the smoking rules and the alcohol rules of the condo corporation. And as long as you're not, you know, damaging the reasonable enjoyment of the neighbors around, it'll be fine to use it. In this manner, condominiums move towards making the entire building smoke free, which a lot of them are. A lot of them you can't smoke in the common areas unless you go on the rooftop. Hi, how are you? On the rooftop terrace and on your own personal balcony, right? A lot of the condo buildings are like that. They don't allow it in any of the common areas. Yeah, again, a lot of them installed proper ventilation equipment at their own expense. This is especially, like I say, if you have tenants in the property that are smoking cannabis, right? So here are some examples of stuff that condos put into place to sort of help, rules that they passed in their buildings to help combat when cannabis came legal. So this is sort of excerpts of clauses that were in their condo acts and rules and regulations, right? So smoking is strictly prohibited in, on, or upon the units, common elements, and exclusive use of common elements of the corporation, including the balconies, terraces, and or patios. So that's pretty stern, right? Because a lot of people, owners and tenants alike, would go out on their own balcony, right, and smoke. For the purposes of these rules, smoke or smoking means to inhale, exhale, hold or otherwise have control over ignited tobacco, cannabis, or any other substance, or to vape or using a vaping product. So again, I think that that's pretty harsh. I think a lot of these condo units did put this into place, but I don't think a lot of unit owners you'll find will be following it. But the basic thing is at the end of the day is when your neighbors start complaining, right? Especially if you're a tenant. Any existing owner and or resident of a unit shall be permitted to smoke in or any of the units or exclusive use of common units if the owner or resident of the unit provides notification in writing to the corporation prior to, the rule being in effect, of their intention to smoke in or any other unit exclusive use. So they tried to grandfather in a clause, so saying going forward, maybe the tenant currently living there is smoking in the unit, and as they gave good notice, they could continue smoking recreational cannabis. But then going forward, any new tenants that moved in, it wasn't grandfathered in, and they were kind of nixing it from that point on, right? No one shall grow, cultivate, or propagate or harvest any cannabis plants of any part of the corporation of the property, including units, common elements, and exclusive use of common elements. So condos are really putting a stop. They had allowed 4 plants per residence, but condos are really putting a stop to people within the units growing, even though they could smoke. No owner or resident shall permit the delivery of cannabis to a unit if such delivery is required to be handled by or otherwise require the involvement of the concierge, security staff, or management. So basically, if you have the kind of building where things have to be left at concierge or management, they were not accepting these as deliveries. And a lot of condo buildings still aren't. So you can't have the delivery to the front desk. Oops, what is this? Remind me tomorrow. There we go. No person shall distribute, sell, offer for sale, expose for sale, or otherwise convey cannabis on the corporation's property. Well, obviously, when these laws came into play, only the licensed dispensaries can and still can. So they're just not allowing the sale of it on the property, which is fine. I wanted to get to the part where we talk about how it affects our properties for our owners real quick, because I always run out of time. So some of the things that came into play with the Cannabis Act that we do have to remind our clients. So our clients might say, I don't really care if my client smokes or grows cannabis in the property. It doesn't really bother me too much. We have to remind our clients that there are insurance issues and implications that come into play with this. So let me just find my notes I wrote here. The landlord should inspect the property every 3 months, because your insurance will be higher on a property if you disclose to your insurance company that you do have a tenant within the property, or if you disclose it yourself that you are smoking or growing, because they consider it more of a fire risk. So cultivating cannabis plants will increase the risk of damage to your property, which is what they really believe, and as such should be disclosed to your insurer. Failure to disclose could cause the insurer to deny coverage later if something happens, even if unrelated to the cultivation. So if they walk into your property and just say your tenant has been growing and one of the lamps that caught the property on fire, your insurance will not cover it. So if you think, oh, I'm never going to disclose to my insurance company that my tenants are growing or smoking within the property, is actually the incorrect thing to do. You should be inspecting your property and finding out whether or not your tenants are up to this sort of activity, because you want to be aware to be able to disclose to your insurance company so you can be fully insured for it, right? There was lots of things happening where, like I say, for instance, like water damage, or they had the lamps to grow the things that were causing fire to the property, and if the landlord had not disclosed it, their insurance company simply was not covering it. Mortgage issues. So lenders have not really stated an official position as how the existence of the legal plants in a home could affect any mortgage approval. But one thing we have to keep in mind is appraisers will reduce the value of homes because of latent defects to the property, because they're unsure still, because it's still fairly new. I know it's been in play a couple years now, but they're still growing. Now you're allowed to grow 4 plants, and maybe it's not a full grow up to the house, but there's still sort of an iffy subject where we don't know what the damage to the property is growing within the property. Especially outside of the property, it's not such a big thing, but if you have a tenant within the property, or you yourself are growing within the property, the implications of, you know, more moisture perhaps in your home, or like I say, the like we were talking about, possible fires, definitely will bring an appraisal down on your property. So you have to keep that in mind for the mortgage company, especially say you're trying to sell a property for your clients that have been tenanted, and the person coming along, the purchaser coming along, realizes during a walkthrough that you know, the tenants have been growing cannabis in the property. That'll be something that'll be disclosed, and it could bring down the mortgage value of the property. Can you evict a tenant who smokes or grows cannabis? Okay, so say you rented to this client now, and say you rented to a tenant, and your client comes back to you and said, I realize that the tenant you put in now is smoking cannabis. I want you to kick them out. You put them in the property. What's our onus as real estate agents, right? So the rule is, if the tenant is smoking or growing cannabis and you have no smoking or growing cannabis clauses, you will still have to demonstrate that the tenant is either bothering other tenants or damaging the property in order to evict them. So let me just take a quick aside. I spent a lot of time at the landlord and tenant board doing the small property management company that I have. Even if you put that smoking clause in, or the cannabis clause, or a pet clause. I know a lot of us put the pet clause in our leases, right, to protect our clients. Technically, the letter of the law, as per the landlord and tenant board, when somebody pays rent for a property, it's their residence. You cannot direct people what to do in their residence, as long as they're not damaging your property or ruining the reasonable enjoyment of the tenants or neighbors around them, right? So you have to be very careful when you take these matters to the board, because if they're smoking within the property and they haven't damaged it and none of the neighbors have complained, you don't really have a full right to evict them, right? Even if this is saying, if you don't have a cannabis or smoking clause, but even if you have a clause, I've seen it happen, right? Because they consider that you can't tell people to do within the walls of their confines of their own house, right? As long as they're not doing damage to your property, right? So you have to demonstrate that the tenant is either bothering or tenants damaging the property in order to evict them. This is what you have to prove for your client. So keep that in mind, right? This may be harder to prove in a single family home rental with no cannabis being produced and the tenant is just smoking cannabis. So here you go. You've put a no smoking clause in for your client. You've rented this full detached bungalow in Scarborough, and your client calls you back and he's really mad because he says, hey, they're smoking cannabis inside the property. I want you to evict them now. It's going to be quite a difficult situation, because it's not an upstairs downstairs tenant situation where perhaps you could get the downstairs tenant on board and say that it's bothering them. It's not a condo board situation where you could say it's affecting the units around them and help get it out. They basically are owning the dwelling for the duration of their rental or their lease term, and it's their dwelling and you can't tell them what to do. So it's going to be really hard to get an eviction. So you have to really screen your tenants very, very well for your clients. If there's something that you know is going to bother them, it's going to be difficult at the end of the day. In a condominium, if the smoking is violating the condominium rules or bothering other unit owners, it'll be easier to evict and claim any costs or damages to owners, the owners incur as a result of the tenant violating the condominium rules. So a lot easier in a condo, especially if you can get some neighbors on board, if you have to go to the landlord and tenant board. Even if a tenant claims to require medical cannabis and it's a condominium, it is expected that the landlord could require the tenant to provide what may be required under the condominium rules to do this, such as installations of proper ventilation systems. So here we go again. Can you grow cannabis plants safely in a home and apartment? You'll likely need a professional electrician and air ventilation system installed to make sure the air is blowing outside and not behind the walls. Some will buy a grow tent. So that's the word I was kind of looking for when I was describing those, those portable closets that you take with you. Maybe they pop up on vacation, with the zipper. That's kind of what they look like. They're a little grow tent to try and minimize the damages to the property. If you go, say, to the landlord and tenant board, and you say that they're growing within the property, and especially when it comes to a condo, and they're going to be damaging the possibly more than just the unit, say within the walls of the condo building, and it could affect the whole building. Who do you think the onus will fall on for that if you have to install some kind of grow tent or some kind of ventilation system? Again, it comes down on the landlord at the end of the day. So you got to be really careful when you come to this, because your landlord could be pretty ticked off at you if they have to install a grow tent or a ventilation system because you put in a client or a tenant there, sorry, that's using recreational cannabis. Quick questions to ask when listing a property. Okay, so things we have to consider now. Has your home ever been used for the legal growth of cannabis plants? So I don't know if you guys see the clause has changed over the years. You remember on our Schedule A's, it used to say this property, I declare this property, or the seller agrees that this property has never been used for the illegal growth of marijuana, right? Or other recreational drugs. We started including legal or illegal, right? Because you want to know both, because like I say about those insurance and appraisal and mortgage implications that it can do for your property going forward, even though it's legal, right? There's still concerns about it. So you want to say the property, including the buildings and structures thereof, and has not been used for the growth, cultivation, propagation, let me just go back up here. There's a good argument to be made that the latent defect needs to be disclosed due to potential mold that can result if not grown safely. So again, you want to ask these questions when you're listing the property, because you can't physically see when you're in the property. You want to know, even if they've been growing just the 4 legal plants that are allowed, you want to know that there might be possible latent defects that you can disclose, right? So clause for a purchase agreement and sale. Again, we're taking that illegal and making it legal, right? So the seller represents and warrants that during the time the seller has owned the property, the use of the property, including the building structures therein, has not been used for the growth, cultivation, propagation, harvesting, or production of any cannabis plant, and to the best of the seller's knowledge and belief, the use of the property, including the buildings and structures, has never been used for the growth, cultivation of any cannabis, it's double there. The warranty shall survive and not merge upon completion of this transaction. So you see how we've taken out the illegal growth, right, in the clause, because it's no longer illegal and you're allowed to have it. So it's a good thing to use, especially if your Schedule A is old and you've been using the illegal growth, because people could say to you, especially if you're looking from the buyer's end and you're creating an offer for your properties now, if you're keeping that illegal growth clause in there and they just legally grew 4 plants, but they weren't careful and they didn't install grow tents or they didn't install ventilation, and there is a latent defect behind the walls, now the onus is on you as the co-op agent not putting the proper clause into the document, because they'll say, oh no, I only signed off that it was the illegal growth and I was only growing 3-4 plants and I'm legally allowed to do so, right? So you have to make sure that you're putting the right clauses into your document for that reason. Okay, they just did a little Q&A. Some of this is outdated. I'm going to go back to the other document, but we'll just say, so it came into play October 17th, 2018. That's when it became legal. How old do you have to be? 18 in Alberta and Quebec, 19 in Ontario. Will I be able to purchase edibles? So this was no at the time. This has changed. I'm just going to go to the other document. We'll see what kind of things have changed over the years. How much can I have in my possession? 30 grams, 30 grams, unless you have a medical certificate for it, then it's the 150 grams, right? Up to 4 plants in the residence. This is a biggie because we had this back and forth a lot. I know there was an agent in my last brokerage who came in and he said that the tenant said they're allowed to grow 4 plants each, 4 plants per adult in the residence. So they had 16 plants because there were 4 adults. And I was like, no, you have to tell them they can't do that. It's 4 plants per resident. So this was a big misnomer. So you have to make sure that your tenants and your are well aware of that if they're going to be doing it within the residence. Does the residence include my backyard? It does. It does include your backyard. And so it was kind of back and forth this time what they were going to do, but it does include your backyard. Where can I buy cannabis legally? It'll be sold through private licensed retailers. April 1st, 2019 is when it came into play, right? Can I smoke cannabis in my car? No, it's the same way you can't open a bottle and start drinking in your car. You can't be smoking it in your car. Can I consume cannabis before driving? You could still be charged with impaired driving if it's found in your system at a roadside saliva test. So you have to be careful. Are there different rules for medical cannabis users? The current laws relating to medical cannabis will remain the same. However, there may still be requirements for the user to provide proof of their medical condition or to provide suitable accommodation so as not to damage the property or bother other tenants. So a lot of them carry that card to say that they can use it for medical use. Any questions so far? It's a lot of content, a lot of like acts and laws thrown if you haven't really heard about it. We're kind of getting used to it now though. But yeah,
So can you explain the traveling to US?
the traveling to US? So it all depends because their rules are different, right? So the big thing is that when we cross the border, what happens? Now you have, I'm allowed possession of 30 grams. When I cross the border, what happens over when you go to New York? You're not allowed, right? So you have to be careful. They were just saying that do the same rules apply when you're crossing the border and that? No, they don't. Especially living so close to the border, and we're always back and forth. Yeah.
Okay, so if I hold a license, is there any issue?
I'm not 100% sure now. If you're a licensed retailer and you're crossing the border, I don't know. I guess you'd have to call the border and see, because like even, like they might have certain limitations. For instance, you're allowed 1.1 liters of alcohol and a carton of cigarettes to cross the border. You're not allowed anymore. So when I'm back and forth to my friends, I always buy, a nice bottle of wine from here that she can't get down there, or something that I really like that I've been drinking, take it down. And then you buy the rest of the stuff you want to buy there, or you're allowed a 24 case of beer per person. So, but the thing is that alcohol is legal in those states. You have to be careful what states you're going into because it's not legal everywhere, cannabis, right? So they're just saying, be very careful, because even though, okay, I'm allowed a liter of wine, a 2.4 of beer, a carton of cigarettes, I'm allowed 30 grams cannabis, but when I cross that border, I have to be very careful because depending what state I go into, I'm not allowed, right? So they're just kind of cautioning us, I guess, right? Let's go over to here real quick. Where was it? I have, yeah.
Why Alberta and Quebec 18 years and
I don't know, but I never complained because, when we were younger growing up, we'd always cross the border to go to the bar a year earlier than we were allowed, right? I don't know. It's what each province is allowed to set their own rules. And I guess they've just decided that they want to go the year younger. It's like, why is the state's 21, right? So.
And the other one is, I went to my friend Romania.
Yeah.
And then it smelled the weed, and then somebody smoking, I don't know, balcony or even a stairway.
Right.
So the owner can complain or not?
So it depends on what the condominium rules are. So if the condominium rules and regulations say that he's allowed to smoke on his balcony, then you're sitting on your balcony beside, you can't really do anything. Each condo board is different, right? Just like some allow barbecues and some don't allow barbecues, right? So it depends on his condo. That's what I'm saying. You have to read up every time you're renting a property. I hope you got everybody online and everybody here. Every time you're renting a property, I hope you're asking your owners for the condo board rules and regulations. It is required now, aside from the standard form of lease, right? And the negotiation we do on ORIA paperwork, on the web forms, we are also required to give the tenants the rules and the regulations of the condo board. Okay, that is so they're aware. Are barbecues allowed? Where can I smoke cigarettes or cannabis, right? What's allowed in the common areas? So again, it just depends on what your friend, his particular rules and regulations are. Tell him to read and see. That's what I'm saying. So if he's not allowed to be doing it within his unit or on his balcony, and he's only allowed to be smoking, say, upstairs on the rooftop terrace, he can complain. He's an owner and he has small children and it's ruining the reasonable enjoyment of his property. Then that'll fall on either that unit owner or that landlord, who, if it's a rental property. Yeah.
But it's here also less powerful owner. Mostly for tenant.
I know, that's why it's so funny that it falls back on the owner, you know what I mean? Because like I say, we went over this with Mark Weisleader, he's a lawyer there and he speaks a lot at Treb. And he was saying, it's funny, but they'll put it back on the owner, right? And he had little examples of all these tips and tricks that you can do, like the grow tents to help your clients and better ventilation and different things that they can use to reduce the smell within the unit, right?
And then you say 4 or 5 grams you can grow the
four max, yeah, per residence.
How long take it if you plant today? Small, how long is
I'm not really sure. We'd have to Google that. I don't know. So I don't use cannabis at all. So I have no idea. I don't grow it. I've never tried to grow it. I really don't have an idea. I'm not sure.
So,
Yeah.
so, because that's the first time I knew that grow inside the house.
Yeah.
In case anybody problem, we have to say yes, we have to leave it. The landlord maybe for 6 months, one time they go to check the house.
Yeah.
And then they complain. We say, well, count it 4, then you can't do nothing. No, that's very.
You can't do anything now. That's the thing, right? Yeah. That's
Some people,
why.
they don't know. They say, what the hell you, what kind of people you brought?
Exactly, right?
They
And
don't
your
know what the hell
clients will
people-
get upset with you. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. It's
Yeah.
part of the screening process. Now we have to be careful because there's not a lot we can do, and we can discover that. Before, if we discovered that our clients, our tenants, sorry, that we're doing that, you could take an order to the board right away
Yeah.
saying they're doing an illegal activity, and
Yeah.
you could really speed up that process to
But
evict them.
now-
But now you can't. Now you have to, now it's allowed. It's
Yeah,
legal.
yeah,
So you really have to be careful of that. Did anybody else have any questions? I just wanted to get to the 5 grams of fresh, 15 grams of edible. Okay, so here's where it has come into play a little bit different now. When I was doing the Mark Wise leader course there, the edibles weren't allowed. Now they've changed it a little bit. So you can do 5 grams of fresh cannabis, 15 grams of edible product. This is what you're allowed to have on your person. 70 grams of liquid product. So, you know, things that you're putting into vapes and whatnot. 0.25 grams of concentrate, solid or liquid, and 1 cannabis plant seed, right? Growing your own cannabis, 19 years or older, only for personal use. Starting material was purchased from the Ontario Cannabis Store or an authorized retail store. So again, you can't just go to some farmer in the field and buy his cannabis plants he has. It is not forbidden by your lease agreement or condo rules. So you have to see whether it's forbidden or not, right? Cannabis edibles became legal October 17th, 2019. So not much after. So April 1st, we see the smoking came into play. October 17th, they put the edibles into play. You're allowed to have up to 10 milligrams of THC in a single package, or up to 30 milligrams of caffeine if it's naturally occurring, for example, in chocolate, coffee, and tea. Edible cannabis products must contain no nicotine or added alcohol. So they can't be altered products. A lot of these are available at licensed stores, right? Let's see here. Not too much else changed. The workplace were able to keep their own things. Medical cannabis, you still have to do have to have a license or a written order from your doctor proving that you can use it. Yeah, but the edibles is the basic thing I wanted to touch in when I was looking up what has been updated since we last did that course. Have you guys ever encountered any grow ups or walked through a grow up before? Have you ever shown a property that's been a grow up before? Huh?
I did show a property where it was tenanted and the tenant was smoking. Like, now I understand what he was doing, because at the time, he thought it was very odd that he didn't at least like clean up or something, like, you know, he knows that he's having showings. But now I see that it's like, yeah, they're not really allowed to. Like, he didn't really damage the property beyond like just the carpets were dirty or something, like, you know what I mean? So it's like according to the letter of the law, like, he's allowed to just do whatever he wants in his dwelling. And so is there any, like, there's no laws against, like, when there's a showing, you have to like hide it or something like.
It's legal. It's
Yeah.
like somebody coming out and having a smoke,
Right.
you know,
Or
what I
like
mean?
having their cigarette packs like on the table.
Having a cigarette pack on the table during a showing.
Or a
Yeah.
wine or something on
Yeah.
the table. So it's like, yeah, so he had all his stuff out and all that. So I mean, it was rude, but it's not illegal.
Yeah, it's not illegal. Yeah. So yeah, I remember my first experience showing a grow up. It was on Slan, and I had recently got my license. So it was a while ago, and I walked through and I couldn't believe the damage to the property. It's incredible because it's a great amount of moisture going into the building. There was mold everywhere, so much so that some of the floors had buckled because, you know, the moisture got into the hardwood flooring and it expanded and it just buckled the flooring. And there was big holes, you know, for the ventilation, you know, or whatever they were doing, you know, big holes in the floor and in the walls and stuff. And I walked through that thing thinking, wow, I never knew what the issue was until I physically walked through and saw it. what the issue was, that these people growing cannabis in the property. So again, it may not be that huge damage when they're only growing the 4 plants they're allowed now, which is why I think they put a cap on it and didn't just say you could grow it in the property, because I think a lot more properties would be destroyed. But then again, it's supposed to only be for personal use as well. That's why they put a cap on it. But even with 4, I've heard that a lot of damage can be done, which is why they're saying being careful for your insurance and your mortgage and your appraisals and the value of your property and the stigma to your property going forward. Because even with just 4 plants, if your client tenants aren't taking care, it can do a lot of damage for sure. All right, let me check everybody online there. How are you guys? How's everybody doing online? Anybody have any questions? Everybody good? Well, now hopefully when you go into a situation there with tenants, especially tenants are the biggest thing. And your listings would be the second biggest thing I say, but since the cannabis laws came into play, I find that the biggest issues that happen with our investor clients, our landlords who have those properties that they're renting out, and we don't have control over that now so much with the tenants we're putting in because it is legal. So look out for it going forward. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm not an extreme expert on this subject, but at least I can help you guys source a nice answer. And have a very lovely week. Enjoy the rest of the sun. It's beautiful and sunny out. And go get some listings this week, guys. Right? All right. Take care. Talk to you guys soon.
You.